What happens when a CEO steps into his own bakery and sees a reality he never expected? Daniel Rivers, the CEO of SweetCrust Bakery, had built his company from the ground up. What started as a single storefront had grown into a chain of 50 locations across the state. But over the years, Daniel had drifted further away from the day-to-day life of his bakeries. Instead, he spent his time in meetings, staring at spreadsheets and responding to investor concerns. For months now, he'd been hearing whispers of problems: low morale, high turnover, and customer complaints. Reports from managers painted a rosy picture, but something felt off. Frustrated and tired of second-hand information, Daniel decided to see the truth for himself. He'd go undercover as a new hire in one of his stores. With a trimmed beard, dyed hair, and glasses, he looked nothing like the polished CEO who appeared in company newsletters. His team assigned him to one of the busiest locations in a downtown shopping district. The staff wouldn't recognize him; most employees had never even seen his face. On his first day, he walked into the bakery wearing a simple uniform, a black SweetCrust cap and apron. The manager, a no-nonsense woman named Carla, greeted him briefly before handing him over to another employee for training. "This is Jamie," Carla said, gesturing to a young woman in her early 20s. "She'll show you the ropes, just listen to her and stay out of the way." Jamie gave him a tired smile. "Don't worry, it's not rocket science." She led him to the back, where she started explaining how to prep ingredients and organize the baking station. Her tone was friendly, but Daniel could hear the exhaustion in her voice. She moved quickly, multitasking as she spoke, and he noticed her hands were red and cracked from working with dough all day. As the morning rush hit, the bakery turned into chaos. Customers lined up out the door, orders piled up, and the staff scrambled to keep up. Daniel noticed Carla standing near the front, barking orders at employees but not stepping in to help. Jamie, on the other hand, was everywhere taking orders, running pastries to tables, and helping a new hire fix a mistake on the register. "Jamie, why don't you take a second to breathe?" Daniel suggested during a brief lull. She shook her head. "If I stop, everything falls apart." "That's just how it is here." By the time lunch rolled around, Daniel was already overwhelmed. He'd expected hard work, but the atmosphere was tense and unorganized. As he refilled the pastry display, he overheard Carla snapping at the newest employee, a teenager named Mia, for moving too slowly. "Pick up the pace, or you'll be out of here by the end of the week," Carla warned. Mia's face turned pale and she nodded silently, her hands shaking as she fumbled with a tray of croissants. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he kept quiet for now. Later that afternoon, while carrying a stack of trays to the back, Daniel froze. He heard quiet sobbing coming from the storage room. Peering around the corner, he saw Jamie sitting on an overturned crate, her face buried in her hands. "Jamie," he said softly, stepping closer. She flinched and quickly wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself. "Sorry," she mumbled. "Just give me a minute, okay?" Daniel crouched down beside her. "What's going on?" "Are you okay?" She hesitated, then sighed. "I'm just tired. I've been working back-to-back shifts because we're short-staffed and Carla keeps piling more on me. I asked for a day off last week and she said if I couldn't handle it, I should quit. But I can't afford to quit. I need this job." Daniel's chest tightened. He thought about the glowing reports he'd received from Carla, painting a picture of a well-run, happy team. Clearly, the reality was far from that. "You shouldn't have to deal with this alone," he said firmly. Jamie gave him a sad smile. "It's just how it is. Anyway, I should get back out there before Carla starts looking for me." As she stood up, Daniel felt a wave of anger and guilt. He'd built this company to bring people joy, both customers and employees. But somewhere along the way, he'd lost sight of the people who made it all possible. He knew then that this wasn't just about observing, it was about fixing what was broken. The next morning, Daniel arrived at the bakery early. He wanted to observe how the day began without the rush of customers. As he stepped inside, he saw Jamie already setting up the pastry case, her movements slow but deliberate. Carla hadn't arrived yet. "Morning," Daniel greeted her, tying on his apron. Jamie glanced up, her eyes still heavy with fatigue. "Hey, you're here early." "Most people try to come in as late as possible." "I figured I'd get a head start," he replied casually. He wanted to keep the conversation light, but he couldn't shake the image of her crying in the storage room the day before. As they worked, Daniel asked, "So, is it always this hectic around here?" Jamie gave a bitter laugh. "Pretty much. This is one of the busiest locations, but we're constantly short on staff. People don't stay long. Either Carla pushes them out or they burn out on their own." "Why doesn't anyone say anything? Like to corporate?" Jamie paused, her hands hovering over a tray of muffins. "You're new, so let me save you the trouble. Carla's been here forever. She knows how to make the numbers look good, and she always hits her sales targets. As long as the store performs on paper, corporate doesn't care what happens behind the scenes." Daniel's stomach churned. He trusted that his management team would uphold the values he'd built the company on. Hearing this only confirmed how far things had strayed. Before he could respond, Carla walked in, her presence instantly shifting the atmosphere. She carried a clipboard and didn't even acknowledge Jamie or Daniel as she passed by. "Jamie," Carla called out sharply from the front, "you forgot to restock the napkins yesterday. Don't let it happen again." Jamie bit her lip and nodded, her shoulders tightening. Daniel felt his hands clench into fists, but he forced himself to stay calm. He needed more time to fully understand what was happening before stepping in. As the morning rush began, Daniel noticed another troubling pattern. Carla spent most of her time hovering near the register, criticizing employees for minor mistakes instead of helping them. When Mia struggled with a large coffee order, Carla raised her voice loud enough for customers to hear. "Mia, how hard is it to remember no foam? Do you need me to show you how to read an order slip?" Mia's cheeks flushed as she mumbled an apology. Daniel saw a few customers exchange uncomfortable glances. By noon, the tension in the bakery was palpable. Jamie was trying to cover both the baking and the front counter. Mia was on the verge of tears again, and another employee had called out sick. Carla, as usual, stayed at the register, barking orders but offering no support. Daniel decided he couldn't wait any longer. During a brief lull, he approached Carla. "Hey, Carla," he began, keeping his tone neutral. "It's pretty hectic today. Do you think we could use an extra set of hands up front?" Carla narrowed her eyes at him. "And who exactly are you to tell me how to run my store?" "I'm not trying to tell you what to do," Daniel said quickly. "I just thought it might help." "Well, don't," Carla snapped. "I've been doing this a lot longer than you. If you can't keep up, maybe this job isn't for you." Daniel felt his temper flare, but he bit it back. He needed to approach this strategically. Later that afternoon, while Carla was busy in the office, Daniel pulled Jamie aside. "Hey, can I ask you something?" he said. Jamie glanced around nervously. "Depends. If Carla catches us talking, she'll probably find a reason to yell at me." "I'll keep it quick," Daniel promised. "If you could change one thing about how this place is run, what would it be?" Jamie hesitated, then sighed. "Honestly, we need better support. More staff, better schedules, and a manager who actually helps when things get crazy. Carla just makes everything harder, but nothing's going to change. Corporate doesn't care about people like me." Daniel's chest tightened. "What if they did care?" Jamie gave him a skeptical look. "Then they'd have to prove it." Her words stayed with him as the shift dragged on. By the time the store closed, Daniel had seen enough. It wasn't just about Carla's behavior, it was about the entire culture she'd created. If one store was this bad, how many others were suffering the same way. As the team cleaned up, Carla left early, muttering something about having better things to do. Once she was gone, the mood instantly lightened. Jamie and Mia even managed a few laughs as they wiped down the counters. Before leaving, Daniel lingered near Jamie. "You did a great job today," he said sincerely. Jamie gave a small, tired smile. "Thanks, not that it makes much of a difference." "It will," Daniel said firmly. "You'll see." That night, Daniel sat in his car outside the bakery, staring at the glowing SweetCrust sign. He'd built this company to bring people joy, but somewhere along the way, he'd lost sight of the people who made it all possible. Tomorrow, he decided, things would start to change. End of part 2. The next morning, Daniel called an emergency meeting at SweetCrust's corporate office. His executive team, seated around the long oak table, exchanged confused glances. They hadn't expected to see Daniel this early, let alone with a sense of urgency radiating from him. "We have a problem," Daniel began, his voice steady but firm. "And it's bigger than I realized." His coo, Linda, furrowed her brow. "What kind of problem?" "I've spent the last few days working undercover at one of our busiest locations. What I saw there was unacceptable. Employees overworked and undervalued, a toxic store manager, and a complete breakdown of the culture we claim to stand for." The room went silent. Daniel continued, his tone sharper now. "Carla, the manager at that location, is running the store like a dictator. She's driving good employees away, embarrassing staff in front of customers, and creating an environment so toxic it's a miracle anyone shows up for work at all. And she's been doing it for years because we've been too focused on metrics to notice." Linda leaned forward, her face pale. "Do you think it's just that store, or—" "I don't know," Daniel interrupted. "But if one store is this bad, I'm not going to assume it's an isolated issue. Effective immediately, we're launching an internal review of all our locations. I want every district manager in the field, observing their stores firsthand. No more relying on reports that can be manipulated." Another executive hesitated before speaking. "What about Carla? If what you're saying is true, she's done," Daniel said flatly. "I'll deal with her personally." A murmur spread through the room, but no one argued. Daniel's reputation for fairness was well known, but so was his intolerance for behavior that hurt the company's values. By noon, Daniel was back at the downtown bakery, this time as himself. He walked in without the disguise, no apron, no glasses, just the tailored suit and confident demeanor that marked him as the CEO. Jamie, standing behind the counter, did a double take. Mia froze mid-pour, nearly spilling a latte. Carla, who had been lecturing another employee about cleaning the tables faster, turned to see what had caused the sudden silence. Her face flushed when she recognized him. "Mr. Rivers," she stammered, her clipboard clutched tightly. "What brings you here?" Daniel didn't answer her directly. Instead, he turned to Jamie and Mia, offering them a small smile. "Can you two step into the back for a moment? I need to speak with Carla privately." Jamie and Mia exchanged nervous glances but quickly obeyed. Once they were gone, Daniel turned his full attention to Carla. "Let's talk in the office," he said, his voice firm but calm. Carla nodded, her usual confidence visibly shaken. Inside the cramped office, Daniel shut the door and wasted no time. "I spent 2 full days working undercover in this store," he began. "I saw how you treat your employees, the way you belittle them, overwork them, and fail to support them when the store gets busy. I also saw how you create fear instead of respect, and how you leave early while the team stays behind to pick up the pieces." Carla opened her mouth to defend herself, but Daniel cut her off. "Save it, I've heard enough excuses. The truth is, you've been here long enough to know better. I trusted you to lead this store in a way that reflects our values, but instead you've done the opposite. Effective immediately, you're terminated." Carla's mouth fell open. Terminated, wait, Mr. Rivers, this decision is final, Daniel said sharply. I'll ensure you receive your final paycheck and any benefits owed to you, but there's no place for this kind of behavior at SweetCrust. For a moment, Carla looked like she might argue, but something in Daniel's expression stopped her. She nodded mutely, gathered her things, and left without another word. Once she was gone, Daniel stepped back into the main area of the bakery, where Jamie and Mia were waiting anxiously. Jamie, Mia, he said, addressing them directly. Can we talk for a minute? The two young women followed him to the seating area, their expressions wary. I owe you both an apology, Daniel began. You've been working under tough conditions, and it's clear that we as a company have let you down. That changes today. Jamie blinked in surprise. What do you mean? Carla is no longer with SweetCrust, Daniel said simply. Both women's eyes widened. In addition, I'm bringing in a new manager who's better equipped to support this team. But that's just the start. We're going to fix the staffing issues here and across all our locations. You won't have to work double shifts just to keep things running. Mia looked like she might cry, but this time from relief. You're really going to fix things? I promise, Daniel said. And Jamie, I want to recognize how much you've done to hold this place together. Starting next week, you'll be promoted to assistant manager with a pay raise to match. Jamie's jaw dropped. Wait, what? Are you serious? Very serious, Daniel said with a small smile. You've earned it. And Mia, I'll make sure you get the training and support you need to feel confident in your role. For the first time since Daniel had started observing the bakery, he saw genuine smiles on their faces. Thank you, Jamie said quietly. I didn't think anyone up there cared. We care, Daniel said firmly. I care. And I'll prove it to you. As Daniel left the bakery that day, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. There was still work to be done, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was steering SweetCrust back toward the vision he'd always had for it, a company that didn't just serve great pastries, but also valued the people who made them. End of part 3. 2 weeks later, Daniel walked into the downtown bakery again, but this time, the atmosphere felt completely different. The bakery buzzed with energy, and the tension that had once hung thick in the air was gone. Jamie, now wearing a crisp assistant manager badge, was helping Mia at the register, patiently guiding her through a complicated order. A new manager, a cheerful woman named Rita, stood behind the counter, rolling up her sleeves to help the team with the morning rush. Daniel had spent the past days visiting several SweetCrust locations, digging deeper into the culture and operations. His undercover experience had been an eye-opener, and he wasn't about to let things slide back to the way they were. Today, he wasn't here to observe or reprimand. He wanted to see the positive changes in action and ensure his promises were being kept. As the line of customers began to shrink, Rita noticed Daniel and waved him over with a smile. Mr. Rivers, welcome back. Things are running smoothly this morning, but let me know if there's anything you'd like to discuss. Daniel shook her hand. Just here to check in and see how everyone's doing. And please call me Daniel. Rita nodded, then excused herself to help a team member in the back. Jamie approached him next, a clipboard in hand. Her posture was more confident now, her exhaustion replaced with a sense of purpose. Mr. Riv, I mean Daniel, she said with a small laugh. Thanks for stopping by. Things have been different lately. In a good way. I can see that, Daniel replied. How's the new team dynamic? It's like night and day, Jamie said, glancing over at Mia, who was laughing with a customer. Rita's amazing. She actually listens to us and jumps in when we're overwhelmed. We've hired 2 new part-timers, so the shifts are manageable now, and Mia's really coming into her own. She told me yesterday she feels like she's finally getting the hang of things. That's great to hear, Daniel said, genuinely pleased. And how are you adjusting to your new role? Jamie smiled. It's challenging, but in a good way. I feel like I'm actually making a difference now instead of just trying to survive each shift. Daniel nodded. That's exactly what I hoped for. You've earned this, Jamie, and if you ever need more support, don't hesitate to reach out. As they spoke, a regular customer approached, carrying a large box of pastries. Excuse me, she said, smiling at Jamie. I just wanted to say thank you. The service here has been incredible lately, and the atmosphere is so much better. It's a pleasure to come in now. Jamie's cheeks flushed. Thank you so much. That means a lot. Daniel watched the exchange, pride swelling in his chest. This was what SweetCrust was meant to be, a place where employees felt valued and customers felt welcomed. After the customer left, Jamie turned back to him. I almost forgot, she said, pulling a small envelope from her clipboard. This is from the team. We all chipped in to get you a thank you card. You didn't have to come down here and shake things up, but you did, and it's made a world of difference. Daniel took the envelope, momentarily speechless. Inside was a simple card, signed by every member of the bakery staff, with messages of gratitude scrawled in various handwriting styles. Thank you, Jamie, he said quietly. This means more to me than you know. Before leaving, Daniel gathered the team together for a quick meeting. He stood in front of them, the card still in his hand. I just want to say how proud I am of all of you, he began. The changes we've made over the past few weeks are just the beginning. We're rolling out new policies across all SweetCrust locations to ensure that every team feels as supported as you do now. But none of this would have been possible without your hard work and resilience. The team clapped softly, a few of them exchanging smiles. And Jamie, Daniel added, turning to her. You've been a rock for this bakery. Your leadership and dedication have not gone unnoticed. I hope you know how much you're appreciated. Jamie nodded, her eyes glistening slightly. After the meeting, Daniel took a step back and let the team get back to work. He stood near the door, watching as customers came and went, greeted with genuine smiles and warm service. Rita gave him a quick thumbs up from behind the counter, and Jamie was already diving into the next task on her list. As Daniel walked out of the bakery, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. SweetCrust was on the right path again, not just as a business, but as a community. And this time, he was determined to stay connected, to ensure the company never lost sight of the people who made it thrive. For the first time in years, Daniel felt like he'd truly earned the title of CEO.